Why do some people think healthcare economics is a hard class? And people often ask me, is healthcare economics going to be hard? Am I going to be able to get through this class? How can you teach this class online? Well, those are all great questions. And I would propose that the answer is no. It's not hard, but it will challenge you. Okay? Every one of you can get through this course and excel at it. And what I often hear by the time the class is over is that most students were really benefited from having a deeper understanding of how things work. So let's talk about economics for a minute. Economics helps you focus on key issues and make good choices with with scarce resources. Okay, so economics is really the study of how people apply scarce resources, and everybody has scarcity. Okay, it doesn't matter how wealthy your economy is. We all have a scarcity of something. Look at those oil republics, where they have all that oil and all that money, but then they don't have water, right? So they have to work on desalination. I'm talking about the Middle East here. Uh, One of the reasons the United States is so successful is because we are such a large country with lots of resources, and we only have two countries adjacent to us. So in one sense, we have, when this country was being formed, we had all kinds of natural resources, but we had trouble with some of the industrial, and that's a lot of what people brought from the old world. So everywhere, every economy has scarcity of resources, and we certainly have that in healthcare too. So I want you to, that's a theme you're going to hear over and over again, scarcity. The other thing we're going to hear about is how people make decisions every day that involve marginal or incremental costs. Don't worry about what that means right now. That'll be in the chapter. But we all have to look at that marginal, what happens if we just put this much more into a certain project? And why is that important? When you're in healthcare, we do have that scarcity. We have to provide for everyone. I mean, especially if you're like a general hospital or a general practitioner. And so you have to think, where should I put my limited resources? And that's a lot of what we're going to learn in this class is how to apply that. So some things that make healthcare economics hard, in healthcare specifically, we have a lot of risk and uncertainty in healthcare. Uncertainty, a great example would be incidence of illness. Every year we don't really know which flu strain's coming out. We don't know how bad it's going to be. We hear news reports every year about more and more people dying, depending on the flu that comes out. There's all these differences. We have worldwide concerns about things coming back that we thought were gone, like polio and other items. We have insurance in healthcare. I'm going to hit these really quick, but this is really a chapter 1 review as well. We have information asymmetry, which is a really cool concept. And what that is basically is the fact that we don't always have all the information, and the people who are taking care of us do. So you really have there's a power issue there as well. Like when you're a patient, you don't really have all the information. Sometimes the doctors don't have all the information on your history. So there's a lot of asymmetry around, and we learned one thing you'll learn in economics if you were taking an intro class, is most economic principles assume perfect information. Well, there is no perfect information specifically, and especially in healthcare. We also have not-for-profits. There's the not-for-profit, for-profit hospital, or just pick any provider. We have different business ways businesses are organized, whether they're tax-paying or non-tax-paying, which makes a difference. We have technological change. We have changes that happen so fast in all kinds of technology. Technology is not just chips and iPhones and tablets in a hospital. It's everything. It's lab tests. It's like new finger pricks that don't hurt as much. Anything that they can come out with, that helps diabetics, for example. And then we have a lot of turmoil in healthcare. Things are always changing. Ownership changes, the regulations change. So we're going to learn about all that. So these are all the reasons that healthcare economics are challenging. But again, I'm going to tell you, they don't have to be hard. So in this class, you're going to find, and this is where I'm going to give you a little advice and wrap up. This class is a mix of qualitative and quantitative, but there's a lot of quantitative, so the math stuff, that's going to sneak up on you. Okay, so I'm going to encourage you as you go through this book. The first chapter is pretty much qualitative. It's kind of an intro. You can burn through it really quick. But But beginning even with chapter 2, there are a lot of little mathematical examples, and these are important because you might see some of those on the test. So I challenge you, do like you did in high school. I'm not going to tell you which ones, but pick the odd or the even, and try to work at least half the problems at the end of each chapter, even if it's just on a piece of paper for your own benefit, because that will help you, and it really helps drive it home. This author, I think, went out of their way to make things real palatable, so when they're introducing things in the written part, it seems very easy to process. But then it's also important to, I think they use the problems to kind of teach the math. So I'm going to need you to do that, and unfortunately take most of that on yourselves because of the way the course is structured. I will tell you when we get to chapter 6, do not freak out, but that's when we start talking about the cost curves, and that's where a lot of people get confused. We'll start drawing graphs, simple graphs of supply and demand, and we'll learn what happens when there's a change in supply, like if a new hospital comes in or if a new radiology center opens, what happens to the existing supply. Obviously it doubles, and what happens to the costs. And we're going to keep this at a pretty simple level, but you must focus on this. I will tell you also, just on experience at Jefferson, I have had people tell me about halfway through that it was really hard, they didn't get it. But if you just stay with me and keep getting through it, you'll be rewarded in the second half, because once we get through the cost curves, it gets back into more macro examples, and people really genuinely like that. It talks more about, we will talk more about macro policy and what happens when people don't behave, which will be the subject of another micro lesson. Economics assumes rational behavior on the part of people, and that may sound kind of like a sci-fi movie, but in our case, rational behavior means basically that we expect people to act a certain way. So you would expect if the price of gas were to go up $2, that people might take fewer trips. Okay, that would be an example of rational behavior. And sometimes that doesn't happen, right? I mean, sometimes, or some people might expect, if you go over to Europe, people drive a lot smaller cars. Why? Because they sell their gas by the liter over there, but their gas is about 2 to 3 times as expensive as ours is. So you just don't see a lot of SUVs driving around unless people are using it. But but then there's still people who buy them. So and we're all guilty of that. So that is why healthcare economics are challenging. But let's try to work together so they don't become hard. I hope you enjoy the course.